All right, we are recording. Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you all for checking out my channel, Cozett Contemplates. And I just want to say, I am like trying my best to not show that I have like the nervous jitters because I'm so excited about the guest that I will have on Cozett Contemplates with me. And so first of all, just to let you guys know, as you're watching this, my guest will not be available visually, but you will definitely hear the audio. So, without further ado, I want to introduce Pastor Daniel Lambert. Pastor Daniel, thank you so much for being willing to come on to Cozett Contemplates.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here and getting to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. So, for everybody who doesn't know, Pastor Daniel and I connected through Chief Arms.
Hmm.
Bates Reed is the heart behind that Chief Arms food
Yeah.
ministry, food co op.
Yeah.
And when I saw Bates on Facebook, and I could feel the energy behind his posts when he was posting about food. And I just thought, I really want to get on board with Bates and what he's about, you know. And so then I connected with you.
Yeah.
Well, I saw you do a YouTube video,
Yeah.
and in that video, you were talking about community,
Yeah.
and you touched on capitalism and democratic socialism.
Yeah.
That just really spoke to my heart. Like I told you briefly in a conversation that we had before we started recording, um, my my heart my heart is in that message. My heart is in that economic philosophy, but I don't have the education.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I could tell, Daniel, as
Yeah.
you expounded and you had like a whiteboard and you were talking about it, and I was just like, that's the guy. That's the guy. So let's talk first. We know that you're a community organizer.
Yes.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about what you do. If you want to tell us about what you do with Chief Farms, what you do
Okay.
as a community organizer, and
Okay.
food justice.
Yeah. 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 Food justice. Like
Yeah.
that's the focus of my life in a lot of ways. I well, I mean, honestly, I've got to tell you a little bit of a story to get to where we're at.
Okay.
I was uh, a normal human being at one
Mhm.
point in my life, and I had a job, and I had a wife, and I had 2.5 kids, and the white picket fence, and all that kind of good stuff,
Yeah.
and and then the housing crisis back in like 2008 started
Mhm.
happening,
Yeah.
and all kinds of crazy stuff started happening. My job started getting incredibly stressful. I was working for a company that was getting potentially bought out by another larger company, and so it created a lot of stresses at work. Um, wasn't able to pay the increasing size of the mortgage, even though I'd gotten a HUD loan and thought I was protected because all of these things. Um, and had kids in diapers, and my marriage was falling apart. And from it at one level it seemed like from one day to the next, but it was not quite that sudden. But from one day to the next, for in a lot of ways, I went from having all those things, going through this hard stressful point in my life, to losing everything, like completely losing everything. My lost my job. The house was I had to sell the house back to the bank in what's called a short sale. The fact that I know what that is sucks.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the and so then my ex-wife wound up moving to North Dakota with my kids, and I was squatting, actually squatting in a house out on Glass Street in Chattanooga. Um,
Wow.
and no power, no water, just a house. And I went through the dead of winter one winter, when it was like snow and all kinds of cool stuff. It was crazy. Uh, and I basically, like, I was at this point in my life where I could have taken it like a Job situation in the Bible, where I lost everything and I could have cursed everything but God, all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff, and sat there and mourned my existence. Um, or I could have went and gotten a job, um, and gone back into that world. Uh, but I decided, no, this was like I could take it as a blessing, as like as a gift, as almost a calling or an initiation. And I honestly, in a lot of ways, I believe that I was called into an initiation, to speak of, like, at that point in my life, because it became this incredibly intense spiritual journey at that point.
Yeah.
Like, the whole way that I perceived reality started shifting. I started meditating, because I had no other way of dealing with the stress, because I didn't have insurance or anything like that, right? Um, and then started, like, food became an issue, right? Because I'm homeless, quote unquote, squatting, which barely have any kind of structure over my head. Like I said, I had no water, no no heat, and I started thinking about food. And I lived in the Glass Street area. Started going around and noticing lots of empty lots. Um, there was too much shade in my yard to grow, where, the house that I was squatting in, and I was too scared to start growing stuff in the yard. So I started going around and planting seeds, throwing seeds out in these empty lots. And in the walking around and doing this, I found this place off Glass Street called Grow Hope, and it's an urban farm run by a gentleman, Joel Tippins, here in
Mhm.
Chattanooga, and just started having a lot of conversations with him. And in that process, like during that same time that that was happening, I was going to potlucks with a bunch of hippie friends that I made. And one day, this crazy dude named Bates showed up. And it's kind of funny because we had been talking a lot about community in this group of people that were potlucking together, because, you know, hippies tend to attract a certain vibe of people. And there's, like, it's funny because right now we're seeing in our culture how how fragile our egos are, because a lot of the same people that were super woke like
Yeah.
6 months ago are, like, QAnon, like, going through these crazy daily panic attacks, like, consistently and constantly over and over. And it's like their psyche is just being broken by
Yes.
the 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 fear-based mechanism that's being constantly pumped at us right now.
Right.
And so it was interesting, though. So going through these potlucks, community was a really big word, and people wanted it, and people talked about it, but nobody wanted to do the work for it, right?
Mhm.
And they just wanted to show up to the party, and spirit was going to make everything happen, and they didn't have to do anything other than just show up. There's a lot of that in spirituality and new age spirituality these days,
Mhm. Mhm.
just speaking it into existence. And there's truth to that, but you also have to be the vehicle in which that gets spoken into existence at times,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Um, so, but no, so we, Bates and I met, and he and I really just, like, hardcore started pushing the agenda, so to speak, the narrative of let's start a community. And of course, it was initially called Community of Chi.
Okay.
because, because Bates has a love affair with his dog. Um,
Yes.
but and
I
it's a
love
beautiful love
chi.
affair. I just like poking at him. But anyways, he and I really started talking about it. And at the same time, I started doing a lot of work as far as like researching community, going to seminars, um, studying, reading, like what makes community, what makes it work, like because communities fall apart quite a bit. They don't last. That's the one thing you find out with intentional community is the buzzword they use nowadays. It used to be called communes back in the 70s. um,
Right.
they they're just like businesses, man. They're like 50-50. They're gonna fail. um More fail than succeed. Most fail within the first couple of years, and it's crazy because it's just like a business, because that's the same thing with businesses. Most businesses fail within the first couple of years. And but what makes successful intentional community? So I started like researching that, coming up with a lot of ideas about that. And at the same time as all of that was happening, um, I had started a community gardening group called the Free Garden Community Project. And the idea behind it was to build free gardens for each other and to create free food networks within urban Chattanooga. And
Nice.
we did that for about a year and a half to 2 years. Built a lot of gardens. It was a lot of fun, but it was in a lot of ways within that same spirit of the hippie stuff, where they want community, but we want it to be like Walmart. Like I just go in and I buy the thing and it's there.
Yeah.
I have it, right?
Yeah.
Rather than going through the whole process of creation of a thing. Um, if you've ever had kids, you know that it's not an instant process. It takes time, and it has to grow into what it is. And if you skip all of that, you're going to get something that's not going to work, right?
Right.
And we skipped a lot of that. But it was interesting because we were a community. Like we were doing community organizing. We were throwing like we were doing like these like festivals, basically going and
Hmm.
finding areas and throwing mini festivals, yoga festivals, trying to we were calling it the love movement. um
Oh.
and it was a lot about trying to mobilize young white hipsters and hippies into some form of healthy community. um
Hmm.
the problem was there's a lot of pushback towards structural organization,
Hmm.
um, because hippies like to party and don't like to have a lot of structural organization.
Yeah.
And so that kind of like it fell apart after a minute. Egos got in the way and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I spent from when that happened, I spent a lot more time doing research, creating relationships, building relationships with activists and organizers in town, but mostly creating relationship networks and getting people to work together. And then this last year, when uh, the George Floyd protest happened, I'm friends with Marie Mott, and she's running for City Council District 8 here in Chattanooga. Vote for her
Yeah.
if you're in her district. Um, but she and I've been friends for years, and we've been having this conversation a lot, like what we're talking about, food justice, um, and in urban communities in Chattanooga, and how to leverage white privilege and
Yes.
money and get it into black spaces so that they have the autonomy to do with it what they want to do with it, and us not telling them what to do, but giving them the freedom to create their own healthy communities, basically, and their own healthy food
Yes.
systems. um,
Yes.
and uh, and so when the protests happened, me and her and C. Grimey, Cameron Williams, we started just like, what are we going to do? So we decided to I started an organization called Healing Gardens Chattanooga, short for
Hmm.
Chattanooga. Um, but and it was under direct, like I guess, accountability with I Can't Breathe Cha, which was like our local protest leadership here in Chattanooga during
Mhm.
the summer, and
Yeah.
so basically holding myself accountable, holding our group of there's like 6 or 7 of us that meet regularly once a week, and we have potlucks outdoors and social distancing and all that stuff. Um,
Yeah.
and we invite people to come and talk. We create it's basically created a healing space to create those networks that are going to be needed in order for us to have a healthy food system here in Chattanooga. And which I want to talk about that specifically here in a moment, but I'm getting there.
Okay.
It's like I said, it's a journey.
It
Um,
is.
but so but what we've started doing though is every Saturday we have a work day, and we pretty much there's a garden on East Main Street that's called the Nema Taking Root Community Garden. It's a African immigrant community garden, and
Oh,
yeah, and it's pretty much
nice.
become our like our home base garden, and we've been meeting there every just about every Saturday. We took some Saturdays off for Christmas break, but ever since the protest started, we've been just about every Saturday been out there, and uh, it's interesting. It's like we've just by coming together every week, creating that ritual of coming together and sharing work and sharing food together. Like
Yeah.
so much magic has come out of that. Like we've made connections with so many different people that I didn't know yesterday, but I know now, and they're like totally on board and want to help us do what we're doing. Um,
Yeah.
and all kinds of cool little projects. We're in February. We're working with reflection writing, uh,
How
and
exciting.
we've got 400 trees that need to be given away for free to people in urban Chattanooga, and we're going to be starting that at Hope for the Inner City. That's the same building, but just the parent organization where Grow Hope is at over off on Glass Street.
Yeah.
Um, and we're going to be like doing a thing where people come and pick, you can get 2 trees per person, got all kinds of trees. Uh, and you got to be a Chattanooga resident. But we're specifically reaching out to the area around Hope for the Inner City right now,
Yeah.
and getting trees out to those neighborhoods specifically for canopy coverage, so that we can
Yeah.
bring down the 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 temperature of the microclimate in Chattanooga. Uh,
Yes. That's so good, Daniel.
but that project actually, though, I have to give it credit to Reflection Writing. They started that, and they got a grant from the city to get 1,000 trees, and through their own outreach, they were able to get rid of like 600 of them, but they have no reach within the urban area. So we contacted them, and they were excited to hear from us because they were like, yes, we want to get it into the urban areas, but we don't know they didn't know any black people that would be able to help them. Uh,
Yeah.
so we do. So we're helping them get that to the right people. And so like Healing Gardens, what we're going to do is when we do that, we'll get our volunteers to show up, and they'll either go out and help dig and plant it for maybe like elderly or disabled people who want to get trees. Um,
Mhm.
you know, we try to get people with trucks to go help take it to people's houses who don't have trucks, because some of these trees are 9 feet tall already. But yeah, so like it's this up until this point, like a lot of it's been focused in a very almost secular aspect of
Mhm.
community organizing, specifically food justice. But in the process of all of this, for a while now, I've had, I guess, a personal, intensely visceral pushback to capitalism and currency and money. And I kind of fall under, in a lot of ways, the a lifestyle choice is what a lot of people call it. It's called freeganism. Um, so I don't have a traditional job. I don't generate income so to speak. I don't go
Mhm.
and try and make money.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I will give the gift of my time and my skills and my services, and some people will gift me money in exchange, but I don't ask for it,
Mhm.
and that's weird to a lot of people. Um, I,
Yeah.
uh, uh, I like, and that's a whole other conversation. But it's by making those choices and having stuck with those choices for almost nearly 10 years now.
Wow.
Um, I I've I've learned a lot about money. I've learned a lot about our relationship with money. I've learned
Mhm.
a lot about how people treat people who have money, how they treat people who don't have money, how your family is willing to treat you differently based off
Mhm.
of money, um,
Yes.
how people use money to manipulate people. It's very interesting, and it becomes extremely obvious when you don't have any.
Yeah,
um,
it does.
because
Yeah,
it's
I
like
know.
you just become a an observer in a lot of ways because you can't participate in a lot of things, and and that very fact alone creates, like, triggers other people because they want you to participate, and
Yeah.
you don't have money, and that comes with all kinds of social beliefs and all kinds of like ways we treat people when it comes to money. And man, you can just show up somewhere and not have money and people will automatically be pissed at you.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
so but no, going through all this, I started realizing that I wanted to be able to create organizational structures that are healthy, that help us meet our needs as human beings. So basically, like what we think of as institutions, um, but not institutions, because what we look at as institutions, in my opinion, are incredibly unhealthy. Um, but we have to, they have to look different in order for them to be healthy.
Mhm.
We have the ability to do that within our current system, but it requires it to look a certain way. And that's really triggery for people. And what I'm getting at is that I come to the realization that in order for me to be able to move and do things the way that I want to do them within the context of the ecosystem of, capitalism, the business, paying bills, all of that stuff. Um, that the church organization was the best suited for me because it gives me the ability to organize in a way that's not set up with a hierarchical structure, which I don't know if you've
Yes.
ever started a business, started a nonprofit, or anything like that. The second you go and sign paperwork on that kind of stuff, you automatically have to tell them who your hierarchy is.
Yes.
You have to put in who the leader is, who the treasurer is. You got to give them a hierarchy, and
Mhm.
you're required to have a board of directors and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
um,
true.
I started doing research on how to organize uh, in ways that were horizontal, is the word that a lot of people are
Yes.
using nowadays. Flat organizations, concentric circles rather than hierarchies.
Yes.
Um, and there are actually quite a few really cool, like, ways of doing that a lot of businesses have taken on. But what I've found in researching, embedding myself into certain communities to find out how it works on a practical level, so it looks like, talking with a lot of people who are into these alternative governance structures, like the ones that I've really honed in on as being the most utilitarian and practical for us right now to move into that new way of doing things is one called sociocracy. Not
Yes,
not
that was the
socialism.
word I heard in your video.
It's called sociocracy. Another name for it is called dynamic governance.
Sociocracy. I'm writing this down. Hang on one second. Sociocracy. And
Mhm.
what was the other one?
Dynamic governance.
Dynamic governance.
Yes. And if you're into software design, there is a software design governance structure called Agile that's based
Okay.
off of the same principles. There's another governance structure that's again based off of these same principles called Holacracy. That's
Holacracy?
HOLO, as in like hologram.
Okay.
Um, I think that's how it's spelled. I could be totally wrong. Um, but no, so like I started studying a lot of these different governance structures and embedding myself within communities of where like the people that run businesses and organization that use these structures talk about the different things that they encounter in the process of both being a civilized conditioned human being within our current culture and then
Yeah.
trying to work within a business structure that doesn't operate within that same mode of thinking. And so
Mhm.
there's conflict there. And so and I've learned a lot from that. But what I've learned is that automatically, by being a business or by being a nonprofit, you have to have hierarchy. And that ultimately always creates a power structure.
Yes.
And uh, it messes things up, it
Always.
messes up.
Always. It always
Um,
does.
Yeah, and so the only way that I found that I was able to say, okay, I'm an organization and I'm able to do business, like exchange money, have a bank account, get a credit card, all that stuff, and yet still be able to retain the autonomy and ability to self-govern without imposed power structures with
Mhm.
the church. And I would bring that up to people and it would scare the crap out of them because, the first thing is we're going to be called a cult or, I'm not religious, Daniel, or that's sacrilegious, Daniel, or, like all kinds of things. Um, but the reality is that it's so for me, I don't care about anybody else. And I say that lovingly. But when it comes down to it, for me, like this path that I'm on, these things that I do, trying to get gardens built in Chattanooga, because this is a fact that I would love people to help prove me wrong on this one, but Chattanooga can't feed itself. It doesn't produce enough food in order to feed itself. It has to bring in food in order to feed itself. And
Exactly.
we don't think about it because we just go to Walmart or Save a Lot or wherever
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
there's food there, but that comes in from a truck. It doesn't come in from a farm on the outskirts of Chattanooga. It comes
Exactly.
in from other countries. It comes in from, you know, Florida, California. The day those trucks stop, you have 3 days worth of food in those grocery stores.
Yes.
If those trucks stop and those 3 days are done, there's not enough food being grown in Chattanooga or around us to sustain us.
Right.
Like we will see a like the apocalypse type situations that we talk about. As soon
Yes.
as the food stops coming in, like that's what's going to happen because
Yeah.
people are going to be hungry and they're going to go look for food. And the first place it's going to affect is the urban areas in downtown urban Chattanooga because they already are food deserts.
Exactly. That's what I was just thinking of that term is we have a great food desert here.
There's already
And
food insecurity now,
yes,
right
there's
now.
already food insecurity. Yeah.
Yeah. So the how do we? So for me, I've gotten to this point where I've started like this is so important to me that I put it in the category of being sacred. And so doing this work of food justice, doing this work of building food systems, that's why I'm working with Bates now. Like, well, he and I've been working together for years. It's just he and I've gotten to a point where the things that we've been doing on our own have come back together. You know what I mean?
Yes.
He and I
That's
both
lovely.
have this has happened several times. Um, and so it's gotten to this point though where we've realized that what we're doing is sacred work, and we can put it in whatever language needs to be put in order to communicate effectively with other people. Like, because I can talk about this in Christian language, I can talk
Yeah,
about this in New Age language, I can talk about this in secular language, all of those things.
exactly.
um because ultimately when it comes down to it, it's a couple of things, but really, I mean, it boils down to like we've got to be able to have healthy relationships with each other. And
Absolutely.
in the ultimately, if we don't have food, water, a place to take a crap, a place to pee, homeostasis, the ability to make more life, and I mean, shelter, I think, is about it.
Yeah,
Like, if we don't have
yeah.
what they call the bottom rung of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if
Yes, I
we
was
don't have
going to.
those things,
Yeah.
then we can't, we aren't healthy. And we don't have a lot of those things. A lot
No,
of
we
us have
don't.
a lot less of those things than some of us, and that's being challenged right now in our culture. And if you've noticed, those with the most privilege are pitching the most fit right now,
Exactly.
because their privilege is being challenged on a global scale, and
Mhm.
they're pitching a fit because
They
we're
are.
putting up with the narcissist, and they narcissist will always get the other narcissist that's being attacked back. Like, they'll always support other narcissists. And
Sure.
so that's what we're seeing at a cultural level. And it's interesting because to me, I mean, in a certain way, it's a good thing because we're flushing out the unhealthy from our communities, and we're saying, hey, we're not going to put up with this behavior anymore,
Right.
you know? And now but we're also seeing like those of us that are able to hold our ground through this, and we're starting to say, hey, we can see we are the ones that have been doing it, some of the work, at least enough to where we aren't falling prey to this cultural, like, this fucking toddler temper tantrum. It's
Yes.
happening on so many different levels. I'm not
It
even
really
talking
is.
politics. I'm
Yeah.
not even talking politics. I'm sure you see it in your personal lives too, because we've all
Oh,
been
yeah.
shut up in isolated and pumped fear and stress and been starved. So it's like, who's managing it through this? Not a lot of us. Not a lot of us. And so we've come to this space to where how do we engage with each other in a way that's healthy, in a way that recognizes, okay, like, so it's not feasible for everybody to just quit their job, Daniel. I've been told that a lot, right? And I don't disagree with it. um I don't necessarily agree with it either, because if we all quit our jobs, it would be a whole other picture. um but
Yes,
I
it
do. Yeah,
would.
yeah, but so the idea became, like, Bates and I've been working on this idea for a while. The idea became to basically just take everything that we've been doing, become a church, and the things that we've been doing are ministries, and we're just going to start operating in that format. And it allows us to organize, give tax deductions, interact with the system without being a part of the system in the world, without
Yes.
of the world, that kind of thing.
Yes, yeah.
um and uh and it's come about, like, you've asked me several times about to talk about capitalism, and it specifically has come about because of, like, studying money, capitalism, governance, those kind of things. Because
Mhm.
when you first start going down that rabbit hole of what does community look like, your first mindset is, how do I become an agent of change within what's happening right now? Like, how do I make democracy better? Or, I'll run for office, and, or I'll start the right nonprofit, or whatever, play the game within the system in order to, make, to to manipulate change within the system.
Yes. That's the best way to put it, because the best way to address it is to step out of it completely
Well,
and
absolutely,
change
absolutely.
it.
The solution is never within the problem circle, right?
Yes.
So the solution is
Yes.
always outside the problem circle. So if the solution's outside the problem circle, if we're doing the same thing that created the problem in order to figure out what the solution is, we're going to be like a dog chasing its tail, or
Mhm.
Ouroboros, the snake eating itself constantly over and over again, and we're not going to get anywhere. We'll get
Yeah.
stuck in these narcissistic feedback loops that our
Yes.
culture has trained us to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so um, it how do we step outside of that? Well, it's like I said, it's we've got to no longer we understand that the thing that we're dealing with is an entity in and of itself. Capitalism, statism, civilization is really, to me, the root of it all. The need to build cities and to create that same thing over and over again. Because once we started doing that, we started doing what I have come to learn is a industrial agriculture, like totalitarian agriculture, right? To where we
Yes.
completely just like completely cut it down a whole forest just so we can go and plant wheat fields, right?
Yeah.
um, or cornfields so that we can have high fructose corn syrup, because that's a big one right there.
Yeah, it really is.
And so we've been doing this though for like 15,000 years. And so we've got this cultural heritage, especially if you're white, because that means that you have been a part of this for far longer. Your cultural heritage, you has been programmed by this for far longer. That doesn't mean that you don't have an indigenous colonized uh, heritage itself, because if you're European, you were pagan before you were Roman.
Mhm.
You were not civilized first, and you can actually go back and find that heritage and connect with it, and that scares a lot of people, but
Mhm.
it's there. It's something that can help you learn who you are outside of, heritage wise, outside of being white, because
Yes.
your whiteness is not a real thing. Your Germanness or your Italianness, that's culture. You can actually go in and find, actual culture from that exists outside of the paradigm of this system of oppression that we live in.
Mhm.
So um when we do that, we're able to start seeing outside of the systems that we use to get our needs met. So I don't know if you've ever done this. Have you ever gone and checked out a dumpster at a grocery store? Like what's in a dumpster at any given point in a grocery store?
I have.
Um, how surprised were you?
Yeah, my mind was blown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean
I
it's
mean,
full of groceries that are perfectly
yeah.
good, still within the sell-by date,
Yeah.
oftentimes still frozen, oftentimes just been haven't been thrown out, and just it's just going to go to waste. It's just
Yeah.
and that's if you're even able to get into the dumpster, if it's not locked, or if it's not a trash compactor, which
Mm.
is increasingly more popular. They want to destroy it, and so the statistic is that we produce almost 50% of the food that we throw away. Like what we throw away 50% of the food that we produce.
That
So
is crazy.
yes, exactly. So like I started like how do we navigate, a system that is incredibly unsustainable, um and is sucking us dry, and still like pay our bills, because we still have to, like, I still got to have my cell phone,
Yeah.
still have to interact with this culture at some level.
Yeah.
And it became. Are you aware of a martial art called Aikido?
Keto?
Aikido, actually.
Keto. No, I'm not.
So Aikido is specifically a martial art that's designed not to attack, but that when you're faced with an opponent, your whole goal is to frustrate them primarily by throwing them down to the ground. So like they come to attack you, and rather than you punching and kicking them and all that kind of stuff, you're taking that energy of aggression that they're moving towards you, and then skillfully and artfully moving it, like throwing them down to the ground, almost like judo, but slightly
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
and throwing them down to the ground. Well, I studied it for a while when I was a kid, and the philosophy more than the actual martial art really just kind of has been brewing in my soul for years. And the kind of the approach that I've taken with a lot of this is what I call a spiritual aikido, where it's no longer about like how do I get the job with the least amount of stress, or do the thing with the least amount of stress so that I can be okay with this, this system, and live
Yeah.
within the context of it, to how do I know I'm no longer a victim to it, but that I'm actively moving that energy in a way that I'm choosing to move it, taking that money, that currency, that job, or whatever it is, that interaction with the system, and moving
Hmm.
it in such a way to where I'm the one that's in charge, right? And I'm moving it into the ground. Into
Yes.
the ground. I'm grounding that energy, literally, even. So,
I
because
love it.
food justice, right? So we're taking this money, social energy, so access to certain legal, things like, can I go get grants from the city? Can I get a grant from a foundation in town? Or is there a rich white person that would donate property? Taking that privilege and leveraging it directly into the ground in urban Chattanooga.
Yeah.
Um, and then one of the goals too is to take and purchase property in Chattanooga and turning it into community land trusts that are owned and governed by the community that lives in that area. So,
Right. Right.
and create whatever they want. Create
Yeah.
we can create farms on these plots. We can create uh, you know affordable housing on these plots, and they'll own it. It'll be theirs. They won't have to.
Yeah.
And it'll be a community land trust, which gets them out of having to pay property taxes. And there's all kinds of cool benefits to it. Um, but no, so like for me, like that's really like where, like, I know it's taken us a minute to get where we're at, but like that's what I do in a lot of ways, is how do
Right.
we take that energy from this current paradigm, this current system, capitalism, let's say, um, and move it intentionally in directed processes and pathways that allows us to, one, use that money as it's flowing. There's a economic term called the velocity of money, and it's a determining factor. We don't really care much about how much money we have, so much so it's how fast and often that money is flowing through us. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what we want to look at. And so what we're doing is as that money is moving through us, we're taking more from it than it's taking from us, right? And then we're taking that money and that energy, that privilege, that good old boy network that I, as a white person, have access to, and moving it into the ground, literally grounding it, because capitalism is going to go away, and that one of the things that I wanted to bring up, what you hear a lot, especially in the echo chambers of politics and in the current culture that we live in, is capitalism, especially if you're young, millennial, Gen X, and to the liberal side. Capitalism is bad, socialism is good, right? And if you're on the flip side of that, is socialism is communism, and capitalism is what's gotten us where we're at. Um, and I can understand both sides of those things, but
Hmm.
ultimately, when you look at it, things were shitty before capitalism. I mean, we had feudal lord systems and kings and the Dark Ages, and all of that is prior to capitalism. Capitalism
Right.
is really only a few hundred years old. It's about as old as we are, maybe a little bit older. Um, and so to say that capitalism is the problem is it's a bit of a red herring, because then we just go ahead and put in another ism, and nothing's really actually ever changed, because we're still destroying the ecosystem and still
Exactly.
hierarchies. You know what I mean? Uh,
Yes, exactly.
and because like and you and I were talking about this before we started recording, is that no matter how much one side wants to demonize the other, both sides are actively participating in what's happening. And so
Yes.
the like one of the things that we hear about here in America is like, oh, we want a governance system just like the Norwegians or Denmark, or all that, the social democrat countries, and how so much better it is over there. But the reality is that they're participating just as much in the culture that creates the problem that we're having. You know what I mean? Like they
Yeah.
still have the banks that fund all of it, first of all. Second of all, they have they buy just as much technology as everybody else. They're consuming oil just like everybody else. You know, they are invading the land of their indigenous peoples in order to use those lands for energy extraction, just like America
Mhm.
does.
Wow.
Check out the Same, Same, indigenous people. They are an indigenous group. They're actually who we got Santa Claus from. Um,
Really?
yes, who we see as Santa Claus, the red caped guy with the beard. That's
Uh-huh.
actually a shaman who would come and give them mushrooms during the solstice.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So like we appropriated that whole the a lot of that culture, and then put our own Christianity, Catholicism to it, and created Santa Claus out of that. So yeah,
Man.
but they are an Eastern European indigenous group that is still existing to this day, and but their land is being appropriated for nuclear testing.
Jeez.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's the thing, is like, and this is happening in social democracies. So,
Wow.
and China is communist, and they're just as bad as we are. So is Russia, just
Right.
as bad as we are. We're
Yeah.
all equally participatory in raping the earth and creating slaves out of brown countries. Right.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so the only solution to that is to stop, to just stop doing that, and create our own food systems, make our own clothes again. Use, that having a relationship with these countries that have these rare earth metals that doesn't involve guns.
Yes.
We've just always done that. We've always just taken over governments if we don't, if they are not going to do things the way we want them to do it. Um, I grew up. My dad was a missionary for the Church of God, and when I was 7 years old, we moved to Honduras, and we lived next door to a dole plantation. And I grew up in a war torn banana republic to a certain degree. And I
Yeah.
watched how, I mean, basically, this whole country was in turmoil because they were wanting to be able to govern themselves and act part certain parts of their population were actively resisting, and then the United States was paying for bullies to come in from their own country to fight against them, and
Wow.
create a whole other government there that was not legitimate. And we've been doing this for forever. I'll suggest a book called The People's History of the United States of America by Howard Zinn.
By Howard who?
Zinn, Zinn, I think is how he spells his name.
Howard Zinn. Okay.
The
And
People's
it's
History of the United States of America. It's a tough read. You have to own up to a lot of things that you didn't realize are myth, and it's myth for a reason, because the United States is an asshole, and we've
yeah.
been one for a long time. We've
Yeah.
been one from the very beginning.
Yeah.
We, one of the things that broke me was when I I was looking at the Constitution, and I was a constitutionalist libertarian for a while. And one day I was looking at the Constitution, I was looking at just looking at reading it, and I just noticed, the first three words, "we the people," that were a lie,
Yes.
because it
Right?
wasn't "we the people." It
Yeah.
was rich, white, landowning, slave owning men specifically. Um, and that's who the Constitution was written for.
Yes.
It wasn't written for it. There had to be violence most often in order for more inclusion to happen within that context.
Yes.
So it's flawed from the very beginning. We're always going to have to like make changes to it in order to accommodate whoever we're demonizing next, you know,
Right.
whoever we're oppressing next. And so at that point, I was just like, man, this is just not going to work. Thankfully, I came to the conclusion by, well, let me just put it this way: reality kind of smacked me in the back of the head and said, hey,
Yeah.
it's not sustainable anyways. You don't have to actively try and bring down capitalism, bring down the state system, the system of oppression. It's not going to be able to sustain itself, and it's going to collapse in on itself on its own.
Yeah.
On its own. You don't have to do anything. Um, your job, and this is an indigenous friend of mine told me, he said, it's like the Titanic. It's going down. The rich people are rearranging chairs on the deck, and
Yes.
that's not doing anything.
Yeah.
And you're in the engine room shoveling coal into the engine, arguing over whether we need to use clean coal or if we deserve more bathroom breaks. But the reality is that the ship is going down.
Down.
So you need to stop worrying about all this other shit, all these other things, and focus on what's real, what's gonna get you floating at the top and not dead, and survive until someone can come pick you up. Kind of.
Yes.
You got to think about it
Yeah.
that way. So the system is collapsing. If it hasn't become obvious to you by now, I don't know what else you need to see, but it is
Right.
collapsing in front of us as every day is a new panic attack, right?
Yeah.
Um, because
Sad but true.
crazy, man. It's wild. Um, but no, so like it's falling apart. So our job is to stay focused, to build healthy relationships, and that one of those that that's a relationship with myself, a relationship with you, relationship with the land, which is one of the
With
ones that
the land.
we've
Yes.
forgotten about the land. But the reality
Mhm.
is like I was saying, capitalism will come and go, socialism will come and go,
Exactly.
United States will come and go. The land is always going to be there.
Yes.
Land was there before we showed up, was there before the indigenous people showed up, and it will
Mm-hmm.
be there long after we're gone. So
Amen.
we have to think about that. It is it we how we invest in the land is directly proportional to the health of our relationships. Like
Hmm.
if we're not actively seeking out a healthy relationship with the land that we exist on, literally the land that we walk on every day, then it like that the relationship we have with that is directly correlated to the relationship that we have with each other. And
Right.
we don't like that because that forces us to look at our relationship with the land, right? um,
Yeah.
but everything's a reflection of itself. So like how I treat others is I'm going to treat the land that way. How I treat the land is how I'm going to interact with people at work.
Right.
How I'm going to deal with my kids, deal with my my finances. All of those things, they're all tied together. And the the thing that's like when I like we can sit here and we can talk about all these different ways of organizing and ways of making change and You know, we can talk about food justice even, and systemic oppression, and it's all good that we know these things and that we're talking about these things. But ultimately, what it if we're not actively every day doing the work inside ourselves to clear out the beliefs that we've been raised to think are
Yeah.
how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
One of the ways I've heard it described is called decolonizing the mind. Um,
That's good.
yeah, and recognizing that it's not something that you'll ever be able to completely do, because well, so I'll be 45 this year. Like, I've been actively conditioned and trained and colonized for 40 some odd years, right? And it's just
Right.
now that I'm pulling myself out of that. I have to be gentle with myself because I'm not going to get it all at once. It's a lifelong journey. It's like peeling back an onion, you know. I got to
Yes,
layers
absolutely.
working through. Um, but it's in actively doing that work, because in doing that work, everything else is an expression of that. So,
Right.
like, how I'm going to spend my money, how I'm going to, work within my community, what's going to light my passion, what's going to move me in the direction of living authentically and contributing to healthy community. All of that stems from my relationship with myself first. Like, how,
Sure.
like, which wolf am I feeding, to use a meme that's out there? Am I feeding
Yeah.
that voice in my head that was given to me by my parents, by culture, by society? Or am I listening to that still small voice inside of me that's pointing me towards what's healthy?
Yes.
you know
Yeah.
and and this is why, like, we started talking, and I mentioned, that this is sacred work for me. Like, that's like, once we get into talking about it, like, that's really what it is, though, is that it's about that the work is about really going deep inside myself and finding out who I truly am. And when I see that and then look out at the world around me, I recognize that I can't work the way that I've been working before. And the truth of who I am becomes what's being expressed. And I have to have faith and trust that although other people may not like it, it may trigger people.
It may.
That's where my magic is. That's where my superpower is trusting that, and trusting that by just being and living from that authentic space and learning to know what is that authentic space, because you've been
Yes.
fed a whole lot of crap that, has more than anything else kept you in a victim mentality your whole
Yeah,
life.
for sure.
You don't have control, and you just have to do it this way, you know uh,
Right.
and the reality is that's not true. We can create a whole new way of doing things. And I think we can even do that within the context of this unhealthy system. Going back to what I said earlier, I think the structure of a church facilitates that in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
um, it's scary to a lot of people, though, because it's like a two-edged sword. It like triggers people, but it's a good trigger because it makes them
It
do.
is.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, well, why does church trigger you? Tell me. You know,
Yeah.
and then they start talking about where they were raised in church, or
Yeah.
they're an atheist. And I'm like, well, you get to redefine what that looks like. It can be anything for you. I think, though,
Exactly.
I think it's interesting, though. We've got, like, the Satanic Church is getting big these days, and they're specifically because they are using the church structure to hold the Christian church accountable for their own beliefs, and it's kind of fun.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm. Mhm.
kind
Yeah.
of fun.
I saw a meme that kind of spoke to that effect earlier on Facebook. If I could remember it, I would so share it, but yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Oh, it was something like this: Christians, pe you're not being persecuted. You're not being persecuted because you love Jesus. You're not being persecuted um, because you're a Christian.
Mhm.
You're being held accountable for not being like the Jesus that you claim to serve.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, that is the, like, the craziest part about when I first gave up money I specifically was doing it out of the spirit of, wanting to follow Jesus and and do what he did and mimic his
Yes.
ministry and
Yeah.
his attitude and the way he operated in the world as much as I possibly could. And when I started doing that, like the Christians were the first ones to get the most offended and weirded out by it.
Because they don't understand. They've not seen any other model of Christianity. And it comes back to the fact that every sect seems to have this undercurrent where they believe that they have the monopoly on the truth,
Mhm, mhm.
you know, and
Well,
that's just not
if
the
you start
case.
acting like Jesus, though, then it means that they have to start acting like Jesus, and they know that they ain't acting like Jesus, and so they get
Yeah.
convicted,
Yeah.
to use their own terminology, and then project that conviction back onto you and say, "You just need to get a job, Daniel."
Yeah.
You know, Jesus didn't, wasn't lazy. He was out doing stuff all the time. Like I'm out doing stuff too. I just don't get paid to
Yeah.
do it.
Jesus was a capitalist, bless God. Don't you know
Yeah.
no better?
It's funny though, man. Like it's funny because like I've had these conversations with my parents specifically, but with a bunch of other people too. And I was like, man, if all y'all capitalists would just give me the money I need to do what I need to do, then we wouldn't be having this problem. I'd have the money I needed to do. But y'all are the ones that don't want to give it to me so that we can create a healthy food system. Why are
Yeah.
you not wanting to do that? And
Yeah.
again, it pisses them off because I'm calling them to the table and I'm saying to actually do the work. And they don't want to do the work. They want to order a better society on Amazon and hope that it shows up in 7 days. And it just doesn't work that way. We're not
Yeah.
going to get a better community, a healthy community, by more effectively managing our money, more effectively running our businesses. We're not going to do it by having conscious businesses, even. We
Yeah.
have to literally reimagine the future. We
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
Jetsons, and it ain't going to be the Jetsons. We have to reimagine the future,
Yeah.
and we have to do the work of getting from where we're at into that end space, right?
Yeah.
And now we don't have to do all of the work because there's a relationship aspect thing going on. That energy is it gives to us just as much as we give to it, and
Yeah.
we have to trust it sometimes too. Trust that life is going to get us to where we're going, but
Right.
it's not going to get us to where we're going if we're actively resisting it at all times, which the current paradigm, the current system, I mean, that's what it's based on. It's based to actively resist nature and create boundaries and to create a sterile environment for us to grow and maintain food systems and our living situation. Like we
R
don't want any other outside forms of life within where we live. We kill everything that eats our food. We kill everything that eats the thing that eats our food. Like we
Yeah.
are very, very sterile. And it's a big reason why we have a lot of the diseases we have. But that's a
Oh,
whole other
sorry.
conversation. Um, but no, I mean it's funny where when you talk about food justice, how it brings a lot of things into perspective. Like
Mhm.
one of the it was observing cattle in these mega industrial cattle ranches that kind of helped me understand why we have a lot of the health issues we have,
Mhm.
because just like cattle, when we live in big cities, we are piled on top of each other, sometimes in the millions, in a very small space, very unsanitary conditions. No matter how much we love our indoor plumbing, we're still filthy. Um, and we are a monoculture, mostly white European people with very similar genetic backgrounds,
Mhm.
and so we have very little, like we create the perfect environment for disease, right? And then
Right.
we we
Yeah.
we get surprised as to why we're always sick all the time.
Yeah.
You go to a
Man,
cattle
that's
farm,
good.
go to a cattle ranch, and you look and you'll see the exact same thing. They're
That is
all
so
full of
true.
antibiotics. They're all sick. They're all stressed out. It's like,
Yes.
and they're piled on top of each other, just like we are. Uh,
Yeah.
and so And the thing is, it's like you have to, like, we can't just move out of these cities, you know? So how do we create a new relationship with our environment? A lot of that comes from not having a system that's actively got a boot on our neck, that's actively repressing us.
Mhm.
Um, but that system is crumbling. So our job again is to like mitigate the blowback of the system falling apart and
Right.
stay afloat as much as possible. For me, you know, food hits all the angles. So that's why I've focused on it for so long. And it's so visceral, like you gotta have it. And I
Mhm.
don't know, I grew up in food culture. I love to cook and share
Yeah.
food with people, you know,
Yeah.
and it's so it binds us together in a way that really not much else does. Like sitting around a fire with each other, eating food and sharing food together, sharing smoke together. There's several things that we've done for thousands upon thousands of years
Yeah.
that really create intimate moments for us, and we've lost touch with them as and this is why I do potlucks with every type of thing that I do, any kind of meeting that I have. Um, any kind of like when we do our meetings for healing gardens, when we do the Chi Farms, Chi Life Ministries, anything, we always have some form of a potluck, some form of an exchange of food, and
Yeah.
magic is sure to follow. And doing it on a ritual basis is another thing. So it's like I grew up in church, and I have a lot of things that I don't like about church,
Mhm.
but I came to the realization that they know how to build community,
Mhm.
and they know how to get community to work together. It may not be the healthiest way, but they know how to do it, and they know how to do it well.
Right.
Um, and the coming together on a ritual basis once a week to focus together in the same energetic space, and to to hold that for a period of time together, that creates magic.
It
Um,
does. Yeah, that just I feel the inside of me leaping at your words because that is magical.
where
That
two or
is
more have come
rich.
together in my name, there I will
Yes.
be also, you know?
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
it's funny because like all of this stuff is in the Bible, but it's
Yes.
organizations that have kind of twisted it and turned it around into something else, into a
Yeah.
social control mechanism.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, this has been amazing, Daniel. I love hearing your heart. I love hearing your wisdom, your insight about all of these things. And there is so much more that I would
Oh,
love to pick your brain about.
we
So,
haven't even gone anywhere. We just started on like talking about this stuff. We just got our shoes on.
I know.
You haven't even, you realize that like this conversation went nowhere. We just kind of rambled on for, you know, however long, but that's okay. That's
But yeah,
okay.
it's okay because it's the
We're creating a
foundation.
space to build on, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hoping that for the viewers of my channel, that I just want to just kind of reiterate that Cozett Contemplates is an invitation to people whom I may not know,
Mm.
obviously, because this is a YouTube channel and I do want to reach people all over the world. But this is also an invitation to my friends, my family, my loved ones, my community, my peers. It is an invitation to be in a safe space, a space where you can be open to contemplate with me alternative ways of being and doing and seeing the world and seeing Christianity, seeing community. I think that we are due, some of us are kind of in this upgrade upgrade phase,
Mhm.
an awakening phase,
Mhm.
but there's still this clinging to the old order of things,
Mhm.
clinging to
Mhm.
capitalism,
Yeah.
clinging to combative Christianity.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's not serving them.
No,
It's not
no, it's
ser it
not.
it's divisive, it's toxic, and it's time to go on to the greater things.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's what I want to do here. That's what I want to do. And so I hope that you'll come back for a part two, at least a part
Absolutely.
two.
Well, we can keep having this conversation, and
Okay.
when we're ready for doing it again, you just let me know.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds good. So in the meantime, if any of my viewers would like to connect with you and find out more about what you do, if they'd like to support
Yeah.
what you do, how can you be reached?
Okay, so honestly, the easiest way to get a hold of me is find me on Facebook, Daniel Lambert. The my profile picture right now is the logo for the Healing Gardens. So it's a potted plant with a fist coming out. It says Healing Gardens Chow on it. You'll know that's me.
Yes.
Or you can go and find the Healing Gardens page or their Instagram and like us on there. Or you can get me through Chi Life Ministries, Chi Farms, either one of those.
Okay.
I can be reached that way. But honestly, like I said, just find me on Facebook. I
Okay.
I'm I don't I'd much rather be personal with people rather
Yes.
than like have a business way of doing things. I like I think it's we get so caught up in like our organizations and our names and our labels and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I want to hear what gets you excited, like
Yeah.
that's so much more fun to me than trying to figure out business with people. And that's why I don't really do much of it when it comes to all that stuff. I don't like it. it
Yeah.
it like you said, how's that working out? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
how's that
exactly.
working out for you? Like I
Yeah.
get that you believe it, I get that you like have believed it for a long time, and I get that
Yeah.
that you have something invested in it,
Yeah.
but how's it working out?
Yeah.
Like
See that?
if it's not a practical faith that's actually like investing in my life and giving me well-being, then do I need it? I don't know,
Exactly.
because
Exactly.
that doesn't seem to be the gospel that the Jesus I grew up listening to preached.
Exactly. And I love too, like when I heard you explaining all this stuff, what is the name and what channel can they find that video?
Oh, okay. So it's Chi Life Ministries on YouTube.
Chi Life Ministries,
Yes,
CHI.
CHILIFE Ministries on YouTube.
Okay. Do you
And I'm
remember the
gonna be
title of
doing
the
a
video?
second part very soon. Say that again.
Do you remember the title of the video?
Uh, I want to say it's aspects of community or aspects of healthy community or something like that.
Something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to encourage all my viewers to check that out. That is so amazing, so enlightening. And what I really love, Daniel, is that you have such a disarming way of sharing this knowledge.
Yeah.
And I feel like you would be able to have a really rich and lovely dialogue with people who may ordinarily or typically be
Mhm.
combative
Mhm.
about protecting capitalism, protecting Christianity as we have known it here in the western part of the,
Yeah.
world. And I just feel like you have a way about you.
Well, thank you. People do get triggered by me. I'm gonna tell you, I can't help but trigger people. It just happens. It's like I've had to learn to accept it,
Yeah.
and I've learned well, but hey, I've learned how to navigate it too. So
Yeah.
it's because I
Well,
can't help it. Like I mean, there's just certain things I'm gonna live my values no matter what, and you're
yes.
just gonna have to deal with it or go somewhere else. And people don't like that. They don't like hearing that sometimes, but
Yeah.
because they're used to bully culture, which is like I get my way or no way,
Yes.
and I'm
Yes.
like, no, that's just not how it works around here.
Yeah, it's not.
You
Ah,
get to be yourself, and I get to be myself.
yes, exactly. It's called autonomy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, um, thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming on, and we will definitely be back for at least a part 2, if not
Mhm.
more. I
Oh
love
yeah,
the idea of an ongoing conversation, but I just wanna encourage my viewers to connect with Pastor Daniel Lambert, check out his videos, and just listen. Listen to his heart. Listen to his heart, because this, to me, this is what it's all about. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Daniel.
you're
I guess
welcome.
we'll
Thank you
go
for
ahead.
having me.
Yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and end it for now, but I will talk to you soon, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.